It's all being done for me. For me. And for you too. What am I talking about? I'm talking about what is happening in the world. Now, there are different ways of looking at what's happening in the world. The negative side and the positive. I'd like to talk just a little bit here about the positive. I was taking a stroll around the burgeoning city in which I live, Parramatta, New South Wales, just west of the Sydney CBD. Parramatta is booming. Buildings going up everywhere. And beautiful buildings too. Magnificent architecture. And many of those buildings are already up, with the various courtyards and the businesses surrounding them. And as I took a stroll through, I thought, wow, such changes, such changes. When I first came to Parramatta, I walked up the main street way back in 1953. The tallest building was a 2-story building with a dome on the top. That was it. 2-story buildings. And now, high-rise going up everywhere. Now you might think, well, high-rise, is that good? Whether it's good or not, the fact is, the world's population is growing exponentially, and people have to be housed, and they want all the mod cons, near to transport, near to parks, near to rivers, near to good walks. Parramatta affords that. So here's the positive, and as I said, all this is being done for us, for me and for you. Every time an architect gets an idea in his or her head and draws a plan, and that plan comes into being, and all the workers, the electricians, the plumbers, the fitters, the turners, the concreters, all of those people, all employed to make this world better for us all. Now, we could live in the past and say, well, it's not as good now as it used to be. Is that really true? Is that really true? Certainly some of it is. I can recall looking at a bookshelf recently in a bookstore, and I saw an old book called The Lucky Country. And this dealt with Australia back in the 1960s, and it was indeed a lucky country. I think it still is. Here we have COVID ravaging the world, and here in Australia, for the most part, people are still living freely as if it didn't come into being. There are certain lockdowns and so forth, but compared with some of the other countries in the world, most of the other countries, we are doing really well. And I think one of the reasons we do well in this country is that people in Australia are not reluctant to help one another. We have some of the greatest and most extensive voluntary organisations in the world. If there's a disaster, we have thousands of volunteers eager to help, trained to help, such as bushfires, floods, this type of thing. But to get back, I think that we live in a wonderful country, a wonderful world. As I said, the world is growing exponentially. We need to realise that all of us live on this one little planet, this ball, this globe. And until we start thinking that way, instead of just thinking about our own little niche, our own little corner of it, and quite frankly, there is no such thing as a corner on a globe. So we are in this position where we can look at the world in two ways. Is it growing? Is it helping us? Or is it doing the opposite? If it's doing the opposite, you're living in a very miserable, saddening, ever saddening world. But if you look at it from the positive point of view, that humanity is growing, uniting, becoming one, and eventually, when that happens, and it will happen, then begins the great adventure, going out to the other planets in the solar system, going out maybe even beyond the nearest stars. I'm an optimist. I think humanity is just in its infancy now, just in its infancy. We've hardly got to our feet. But once we get to our feet, not just the world will be our oyster. Probably the whole Milky Way galaxy will become it too.